Alright, so I'm Kevin McCain with Kevin McCain Studios and Night Horror Classes. And today we're going to be doing a small vignette. We're going to be doing a small still life painting. And I've toned the canvas a little bit because we're going to have some of a white tablecloth in there. So we want to get rid of some of the glaring white. I think I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of sort of a medium gray color. And we're going to start to place. I think we're going to use more of this area over here as far as that goes. So let that down just a little bit. I think that'll be good. All right, so we're going to continue to sort of lay in some of the other elements. Got a couple of strawberries that are making an appearance here in this painting. Like so. Got a strawberry through here, which we've got through here, like so. All right. And we're just going to continue to lay some of this out. So yeah, we're going to continue to lay in the still life here. We've got some of the leaves of the strawberry. I'm going to put in there. We got some of the leaves of the strawberry coming off this one as well. And back here. We've also got the fact that it's a little bit of a fold right through there, and a little bit of a fold right through here. And then we're going to do the put on the form shadow. In other words, where's the light and shadow separate on this strawberry? Where does it happen over here? Like so. All right. So again, this is the light and dark there. Light and dark there. Strawberry's a little bigger, so we're going to bring this up and over a little bit. Something like that. We didn't have these grapes behind us, and the reason I wanted to draw some grapes today is because people have really hard time with whenever they're drawing grapes. They end up trying to draw it like they're drawing marbles or something, or they do all the grapes individually instead of dealing with them as a grouping. And so we're going to go ahead and start by putting together the grouping of these grapes. So this is the basic shape that these grapes will make as we've massed them together. Like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut away into some of these areas. So we're going to think of them as a group first, and sometimes people go right into making it, oh, we have the grape there and a grape there, and again it starts to look like marbles or something. So we're going to sneak up on this a little bit because we have a grouping of grapes that are in front, and then there's some grapes that's set back, further back behind. And so we want to make sure that we're dealing with those grapes as well. And then we have these grapes in front, and then again there's a further grape deeper back and behind in there. And so there's grapes in front and there's grapes in back. So there's basically in front we see a grape here, and then another grape that's on top of there. And we're going to keep these again sort of like they're a cluster. So again, we're not going to just start drawing circles and hope that it turns out. And they're not even circular. They're more like ellipses. Some of them are a little oval, but they're closer to ellipses than they are ovals. This one that's on top here, again, it's touching a grape that's further behind. So that grape's over there. We've got a grape that's, again, over here that we see. That's rising up a little bit. This stem comes in front of there. There's again a little distant grape back here, and then another one back there. So again, instead of trying to do these all like a bunch of marbles, we're trying to think of them as a grouping or a mass, as some people will call it. Mass, how they look together. That one line I just used was too dark. I picked up the wrong color. It's too dark, so I'm going to take that out a little bit. Because if I have that paper when I start, or that paint in there when I start laying the color in, these grapes are light green grapes, and so it'd be way too dark. It would start to overcome. It would start to fiddle too much with mess around too much with the other color that we're going to want to put down on this thing. And I'm just roughing these in, so there's a couple here where I'm not excited about the shape, so but that's all right. We're gonna change the shape a little later on. That's what we can do with oil paint. That's the great thing about it. So we can go ahead and go, nope, don't like that. Good, we're gonna change it. And we got another far grape behind here, and that was too dark. All right. Now we've also got some little stems in here that I want to deal with, because that's how these grapes are. Some of it that's going to help us to see what's in front is because some of these we actually see the stems going to those grapes, and that's what's going to again help to kind of distinguish that these are in front, and the others we can't see, so they're a little further back. All right. Got that going over there. So now we've got the basics of this little still life sort of roughed out here. Again, we've got some grapes here in the background that are a little more distant, so we're just going to put a sort of a value back there to say, hey, there's something back there, but it's pushed further back, and I don't want it to get too bright. And so we're going to cut in the shapes that are further behind and some of the shapes that are further forward. This is where we'd start to cut some of these in a little bit. Like so. Now we're going to go ahead and start roughing in or massing in the basic color shapes. we're not going to use any more than 2 values for any one area. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Now I need to be looking at the temperature of the light. We have a somewhat warm light source. It was a little dry, so let's try that again. Okay. That's way too dark. Okay. Okay, I'm going to start this out. I'm going to be scrubbing a little bit to get some of the paint down to the canvas a little bit. Try a little bit more of that. The thing about cloth, there's some cloth behind it, and it's very angular the way it cuts back and forth. And so I want to give a little bit of a nod to that. The temperature of the light that we're using has a lot of orange to it, and it's very, very light. It's almost white tablecloth, or the cloth is almost white, but it has just a touch of orange, but it can't be too bright an orange, otherwise it's not going to look right. So I'm adding just a little bit of light warm gray, which would be my brown and white that I've used, and we're going to use that to then knock this in over here, like so. All right. There's also some light, very, very light. You gotta be careful with, again, what happens when we'll see a color and we try to put way too much. So there's just a little bit of pink going on in this. Just the slightest amount. Now, I'm going to be sending you a photograph of this, but understand that photographs never will match the color you see in real life. So I'm going to be putting just a tiny bit of some of this warm gray with just a touch of red to make it just a little bit of that touch of sort of like a dusty pink, just a little bit in there. And I think that's going to be fairly important. Bring that in here. And I usually start from background to foreground, so that's why I'm putting some of this stuff in. We have sort of a half tone that's going to go a little warmer. It's basically a shadow, but it's where the shadow has the light reflecting back up into it from the cloth, and it goes really warm. So I put just a little bit more orange in there. In fact, this is probably going to be a little too cold. This where it's a little bit too much blue, I think. I might have to warm this up with just again a little bit of a sort of a light brown or something, just to bring a little bit of warmth in there. But that's all right. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to keep this soft in the background here as far as that goes. Let's see. There's a part behind the grapes over here where we get a little bit that's in light, and so we get a little bit of lighter value and a little bit of color coming in through there. Now that might be a little too light too quickly, so I'm going to grab a little bit of my light brown gray, and so this will knock the well, the intensity isn't too high. It's going to knock the value down, not the intensity so much. So bring some of that in right through there. Then right next to it, it goes a little darker, and through there, that's a little too much. So we're going to come over here. Bring this light in there. Well, this isn't light, this is actually shadow. There's a bit of light on top that I'm looking at, so not multitasking well. I'm looking at the light, but I'm over here painting in the shadows. So I'm trying to plan ahead, you know, a little bit what I'm going to be doing on this thing. Now, if this is blue and then this has a little bit of orange, it's going to be natural between the two. There's probably going to be a little bit of sort of a blue-green, as it's in halftone, and that little bit of green will give it enough warmth that it can. No, I don't think there's enough warmth in there, so put a little bit more in here. I actually mixed up a little bit of orange, add this to be our halftone, because it just seemed like it needed more warmth, and that orange warmed it up. So what I'm talking about when I'm saying warm, at this point, I'm talking about does it look like it's more yellow, orange, or red, or is it blue, purple, or green? So that's what I'm talking about. There's like there's like 3 different ways you can talk about warm and cool. And I'm just talking basically about, do I want to add more orange or red or yellow to this color? There's other times I would be adding blue or green or purple and calling that cooling it down. So again, we're going to add this little bit of lighter in here. And again, I'm just trying to get some of the subtlety that's happening back here in this. I don't want to get. I want to keep the edges soft, because if they get too hard, then they're going to become too distracting. I just want enough information back there that people will go, "Oh, okay, yeah, there's something happening back there that's going from light to dark. It seems like there's irregular shapes. I'll bet that's cloth." So we just have to have enough information that our eye goes, "Yeah, okay, I've seen something like that before." And, you know, it's just what we call a suggestion. And that's how we suggest things. We put just enough information that our eye can go, yeah, okay, irregular shapes, different values, lighter to darker, warmer to cooler. That must be a light, you know, drapery or something that is, you know, sort of this shape that can bend and fold and be very irregular like that. And there's only a few things it could be. It could be cloth or something like that, but it's too random to be something like living. So, you know, again, our brain tries to go, where have I seen that before? And it tries to figure out what we're looking at. And so as long as we have just enough information, like right now, just putting the right values in, softening the edges, putting just enough of the right value in just enough places that our brain goes, okay, I think I've seen something like that before, and it makes a guess. And again, when we do up here up front, there's going to be a little darker, and so if we do it right, our brain go, okay, I don't need to guess, I know what that is. Okay, so again, we're just getting some of this value down here as far as that goes. Bring this value in a little bit so it doesn't. You want to make sure that you don't have, you know, that it's not getting lighter on a corner. That'll take your eye off the. It'll draw your eye out of the picture. We're even gonna darken a little bit in here, just a little bit. Keep my eye further into this picture. I think we can drop the value just a little bit more. Maybe keep it on a little bit on the warmer side though. So a little bit more orange. I'm gonna use my brown gray and with my blue gray to warm that the blue up. So again, we're trying to warm and cool, and we're just talking about adding brown, which is orange, to my blue, so that we can get neutral, but it's still neutral, but it's a little bit on the warmer side of neutral. Okay, so I'm actually working pretty thin on this right now. I don't want anything to become too distinct, too much form. I'm just trying to keep it ethereal. Light values, softer strokes. As we come down into this, just little stuff like that. And I just realized there's a couple places where, again, it needed to probably go just slightly. No, we're really light here, but there are a couple places like it could go just a touch darker. And I think that after looking at that, like this, there's a couple places in here where this could go just a little bit, just a touch darker. These strokes are too heavy. Okay, so what I would do is I'd come back in and just, I could turn my brush to the side and just, sort of go over them up and down like that. That will keep it softer by doing that. As far as that goes. And so I think we've got enough information here where we can keep going, because it's not about what's going on here in the background, it's about what's going on here in the foreground. It just needed just a little bit touch more light, it seemed. And so it seemed like that's going to really help. There's a couple other places that, probably shouldn't be worrying about this soon in the game, but a couple places where we need just a little bit, so it looks like we're still dealing with white cloth. If it gets too dark, or it might start to look like, we're dealing with ivory cloth, and it's not supposed to be ivory, it's supposed to be a white cloth. So we're going to come back in with just enough light in a couple places so that we know that, that is white cloth, I guess. So we're going to bring some of that lighter value in here, just a touch. Now, in the beginning, usually we'll try not to go too white, so because we want this to have more contrast than that. So if this goes lighter than this, then it won't. So I'm not going to, and you can't play with that too much either. I'm actually going to leave that for now, and I'm going to come back in over here, and we're going to deal with this part of the tablecloth. There's some cast shadow on this cloth. I'm really surprised how warm some of these shadows are. Usually you'll get a warm, cool sort of thing going on, and we're getting just a lot of warmth, which is a little unusual. It's a lot unusual, actually. But so we've got this there that's going off the page. This is our cast shadow on the tablecloth. So again, I'm going to cut in some of the shadows, some of these shapes that the shadows are making. Because they're going to help the lights the darker they go, everything that's light looks lighter, as we have some some richness in here. Again, these have some cast shadow in here. Something about like that. Okay. And again, this is just a study. This is just a little vignette, meaning it's a small little composition. It's a small little still life, and it's more of a study. A lot of times you'll say vignettes. You mean a little study. Sometimes they'll be taken to a finished state, but it just means it's something small on a small scale, not too complex. It's usually, again, it's done for studies. but this will be really great for bringing in some colors we haven't used, and again, some of these challenges that we're going to have to face. And now I think we're here to the point where we can put in some of the some more of the lights and take my eyes out of focus. There's a couple places that, again, I'm going to want just about as wide as I can go, because that will be what we call keying. In other words, nothing's going to be lighter than these marks in a couple places. Now the cloth isn't bright white everywhere. It's because it has form shadows. It has values and things. It's only a couple key places is it going to have, where it's going to be about as bright and as white as we can possibly make it. And so we want a couple of those to give us, we can lock in how light or how dark other things will be based on these key little values. And in fact, I keep saying key because it's actually called keying it in. It means that you're establishing how light or how dark something's going to be. And so we're going to relate how light or how dark something's going to be based on these values in just a couple of places on this tablecloth. Okay. So again, this will be the lightest lights on that tablecloth. And then we're going to have some dark values and some middle values and all that good stuff. As this comes down, there's just so much red in here. It's really disconcerting. So that's again, I'm very sensitive to temperature. In other words, or in subtle shifts of color, because I'm dealing with color for a long time. So this is going to be the half tone as this cloth drapes down and comes down the table, as far as that goes. Okay. Again, we want to do this, we're not going to be here for, years trying to do this, so there's going to be some simplification of different areas as we're dealing with some of this stuff. Alright, so let's grab a little bit more sort of warmth. Warm gray, added a little bit of blue, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red. So I was wanting sort of a dull, warm, light green color to put on this tablecloth. And I'm looking for something that's supposed to be my middle value, as far as that goes. Now again, everything looks really light, and it is. And we haven't put any of our deeper values in just yet. And we're going to get there. But again, we're just putting some of this in for now. Like so. Alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and start to put in something with the strawberries. Strawberries are pretty important in our little painting here. So we're going to want some of those in there. And that will give us, it'll really help us to get a feel for that these will be a little lighter once we start putting in the red. Now the lightest red on some of this is sort of a red-orange. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this up. So I'm going to take a little bit of the red and put a little bit of orange with it. I knocked it down a little bit. I'm going to see how this looks for that beginning value. Maybe we'll lighten it up a little bit and go just a slight bit oranger. There's an idea that it's easier to change and darken a value than it is to lighten a value. So better to be a little on the light side than too dark and be wrestling it, trying to lighten it. You're gonna find you're gonna have a losing battle. It'll just be harder to do. Not that you can't win it, but that you have a bigger chance of just having a real tough time, and sometimes losing the battle and losing it hard. So we're gonna err on the side of it being a little lighter, and we're gonna err on the side of it being a little warmer too. So okay. Now this is the lights, and then we're gonna put in the dark values. Now for this, we're gonna come in here and we're gonna make this Christmas red just slightly. So this is our Naphthol red. That's pretty close to a Christmassy sort of red. We're gonna add just a little bit of blue to it, because as it goes into shadow, your color will change. So it gets darker, but it also changes what's called temperature, meaning warm versus cool. And so I'm going to darken this, put a little bit of blue in it, darken it probably with my darker gray because that's got a little bit of blue in it. And then put this in here for the shadow color. So we're breaking everything down into two values. Start with. Like so. Alright. Here's this one in here, like so. Now again, similar to these strawberries present a problem because when we think of strawberries, everyone thinks of the seeds, and all of a sudden they're trying to render every last little seed on this thing, and that's again a mistake. So we're going to start off with, again, we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to try to put just enough information to make it look like a strawberry. We're not going to go in there and start trying to put little dots on there for seeds. That's just not that's a terrible idea. I'm now going to mix some of the greens for the tops of these strawberries. So this will be the lights. This tells us how dark these guys really are. Okay, and so there's a couple of these that are in light, just a couple places, and the rest of them are in shadow. And so that becomes important that we have the shadow values. So we're going to mix that up next. And this is darker by a couple of steps of value. Okay. Where I come in here, put in these darks. Now I think that's a little light side, so I'm going to grab a little bit more. Okay. All right. Looks like our strawberries have had a bad hair day. That's okay. We're going to come in here and clean some of that up. This is just the beginning phase of this. Again, a lot of times we'll talk about how we can't make a better choice until we make a choice. So now that I've got my choices down there, I can start to go, well, you know, I don't like that one. I think that choice could be better. That's all right, you know. But I'm gonna go further. I'm gonna go further into this. I'm not going to not going to get into it just right now. We got to get everything covered before we start getting into this too much. Just going to try to cut in that shape a little bit. A little sculpting. That just means I'm moving it around with a brush. Makes it sound better than what it is. It just means I cut into it and then I'm moving the paint around a bit. I know I said I have to move on, but there's this part right here I think is going to be just, I need to at least address it before I go too far. That was not what I wanted. I thought that I'd have a much lighter bit on my brush. That's a little better at least. Okay. So now we're going to come into the grapes, and we're going to start with two values: the shadow side of the grapes versus the lit side of the grapes. Now the shadow side are darker. These are green grapes, and so they're really quite green. But the greens in the shadows are bluer than the ones, you know, that are in light. And so we're going to have some of this. So we're going to have these grapes back here. I think we need a little more, maybe a little more blue. I'm going to bring a little more blue in here. As far as that goes. And this is just a general light versus dark. So this isn't the final value on here. It's just like what we did with the stems, not the stems, the leaves on the strawberries. All these back here in shadow. Okay. And then we're going to have the light grapes. Okay. So we're going, that are warmer and they're in light. So we've got this warm orange light, which is bringing out the green in the yellow green in these grapes. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and bring in some of these yellow greens for these grapes. Now this isn't going to be the lightest light, this isn't the highlight, this is sort of the dark middle value. So we're doing on here. And that's important to understand what we're up to. Okay. So again, and I'm not trying to think of individuals yet. I'm still thinking of the group. That's why two values. That doesn't mean that everything's all, you know, I'm still trying to think of, you know, that this is individual, but this one touches this one, which means it should have the same value. They sort of melt into to each other. This one then melts in there. This one's kind of on its lonesome. As far as that goes, this guy has a little bit back there of this value. Alright. Let's see, where's my original? Needs a little bluer. Somewhere between the, so that'll do. So there's this little guy back here. Okay. All right, then we have these guys back here. Now I added, this is sort of the lighter side, but I added a little more blue because I need these guys to feel like they're, even though they're on the lit side, they're in the shadows, you know, not in the shadow, but they're behind these. So they're in light, they have places that are in light, but I need them to recede. So we need less contrast, and you have to have a shift in color. And so I'm shifting it a little bit bluer, and that will keep them in the back. And then when I bring these lights, I'm going to bring these again with the more yellow, and that will bring these forward. Okay, so we're going to come in here with these guys. And again, this is the rough end for the grapes. This is not the finished grapes at all. This is just the starting point. And so I'm going to go ahead and put some of the stem in here that we've got. On this, the grapevine, as far as that goes. Or at least the stem to this cluster of grapes. So we're going to bring this all right. So something like that. All right, so we've got the two different the values in for every object here, and now we're actually going to get in here and put a little more information on these guys. Now, on these grapes in the back here, again, they're in light, but they have to be slightly darker, not a ton, just a smidgen, just a scotch, but they have to be a little on the bluer side, so they stay in the background. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and say, is that the lights? Is that blue enough? I don't think it's blue enough, so I'm putting a little more blue in there. And we'll go, okay. This will be these little grapes that are catching light back there. Those are the light values. Now they also have some dark values, so we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of the dark into here. Now we don't want too much contrast, so they'll jump out in front of this one, so we got to be careful of the contrast. So we're going to get a little bit bluer there. Actually goes into shadow right there. This guy behind him is not in shadow as much, so he's a little lighter. So again, we're just going to put enough information that we have light, dark on these guys. That's going there. This one is going around there. Okay. All right. I just need enough information to make sense of what's happening back there. And then behind the grape, you have the tablecloth that's in halftone. Halftone meaning middle values, and so it's lighter. So we're going to come in here And we're going to make that a little lighter. Okay. We're going to come in here and make that a little lighter. Alright, we're going to come in here and break this stem up a little bit with these leaves. Right, like there, just for now. That may not have been doesn't look as good as I had hoped, but doesn't look as bad as I feared, and sometimes that's all we need. So I'll go ahead and take that in just a bit more. This is going to still change, but I wanted to get some light in there. That way when I bring the darks back over it, some of that light will remain. Some of it will disappear, but some of it will remain. I'm going to take this a little bit. We're going to put the darker underside of the shadow on this stem. Like so. We have some places on the stem that get a little redder. So this is just a change in the hue, just a slight change in the color. And that can be a very effective way of showing the subtlety that's happening as the light moves across this surface. Just a scotch of color. Got a few places in here again where we do get just a little bit of color as these stems come down through here onto there. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm looking for big shapes, but there's a couple of places where it kind of breaks up and through some of these stems a little bit, and that's going to become important to give just a little bit more information. We can start to trim in a couple places this stem. The top of the stem actually gets lighter and oranger and almost like a yellow orange up here. That's too light. Okay, that's what I'm looking for right about there. And just before that happens, this gets a little bit darker right next to it. So just a little bit like that. Again, that can be a very effective look. So it's value. I don't have like a number one little brush here that I'm doing all kinds of little stuff with. This is, pretty big chunks. I mean, I've got a number 6 here. That's what I'm using. So it's not a tiny brush at all, but we're getting some, just some really nice values. Now I'm going to come in here and trim around that right there. I need to get a different value. Trim around that right through there, like so. Alright, so I think I'm done playing with that. Now we're going to trim around some of these. We're going to redefine the form. In other words, we're going to trim around some of these grapes too. Trim around the form, and we're going to describe exactly what the overall shape of this clump of grapes looks like. And there's probably not enough talk about that sometimes in some classes, but it's really people talk about the silhouette and the strength of the silhouette, and that's what that means. Is that all these groupings of these grapes are creating a silhouette shape. And so the silhouette is really going to help describe or detract. In other words, make it not look so right. And so we have to be very aware of it. And even if we're changing it, we just have to be clear. But it'd be clearer than less clear when it comes to painting. Now there's some deep shadows back here in this area. And I'm going to mix up a shadow color that's a little bit, a little darker, with a little bit more blue to it. I need some of that green though. It's got to be a green to some extent. But this is for, again, some of these grapes are, you know, there's some deep shadows casting onto other grapes and other forms, because these grapes are touching other grapes and on top of other grapes, and it's just causing these to happen, these shapes from these darker colors back there, these darker values. Let's go ahead and take a little bit lighter blue, a little bit more, and we're going to define just a little bit of this edge, just a scotch, because this is one grape that's popping in front of another, but still back in shadow, so we don't want to get too light. Again, I'll have to be careful that we don't go too dark either, but we need just a little bit more, it seems like. Just a little bit more. All right. All right, a lot of this is just indication on a lot of these things. We're going to go ahead and bring this down into there. As far as that goes, we got some grapes back there behind there that are a little lighter. They're sort of shining through this big pile of grapes. Like so. And again, I haven't started detailing any one grape, but we're actually going to just on the ones in front and leave the other ones alone. So I'm going to pick up. So there's going to be dark tones, there's going to be reflected light. There's also some translucency stuff going on here with these grapes. So we're going to try to be aware of some of that. Now that was a little on the dark side, but that's okay. But this is supposed to be the shadow side, so I'm going to darken this a little bit. Okay, so this is the shadow side of the grape. Then we have some reflected light, so that's what that is, and we can go ahead and bring in. Now remember, it has to be darker than anything in the light, so we can bring a little bit more reflected light into that grape. Then we're going to get in here into some of the light family, and we're going to want some should be a little more intense. If these are green grapes, this is going to be more of a yellow green. That's too dark. That should actually be down here in the darks. So I'm pulling this back down. This just seemed like it was too blue. There we go. That's looking better. Then we're going to put our light values. So we get this a little bit lighter. This will be our light values, like that right there. Okay. And then we're going to put our highlight So we have this diffuse little highlight that's going in here. Put the highlight in right here, right? And once we do that, if we've got the values in the right place, this thing should really start to pop. Now, or in other words, start to have some depth. Again, there's going to be a little bit of sort of lighter light value. It gets a little warmer. It starts to turn. Now that's too light. It looks like I had a little bit of white left on my brush, so it pushed on there, so I need to pull that off. And it did. It knocked it back a little bit. And so this is what we're going to do with just these 3 grapes. We're going to go ahead and come over to this guy over here. I'm going to go ahead and make the shadow side like so. Like that. We then have a little reflected light on the bottom of this guy, just a scotch. So a little reflected light down here. Okay. This goes into shadow here. Lighten that up. This is coming up into light, but is also in sort of a halftone going backwards, so we're going to make it slightly bluer. So even though it's coming up into the light, it can't, if it's too warm, it'll come forward. So it's lighter, but it's slightly bluer. That will push it back. Then as it comes forward, we're going to bring some more warmth, some more yellows in here. Warm that up. Okay. Like so. And again, we're going to have a highlight on here. Okay. So a little bit of a highlight on that grape. Now there's really soft contrast through there, so I'm going to try to reestablish the dark side really quickly. So let's come back in here a little bit. Just a scotch. That's a little nicer. A little more contrast. Okay. I think we need a little bit more of some of that same thing through here. Bring some of that down. Get a little more contrast. A little bit more dark of this guy behind that's actually in cast shadow. So that needs to be slightly darker, so we darken that down. This is supposed to be, well, this is actually hovering above the grape, but we're going to, instead of changing it, I'm just going to make it look like it's touching. So if it's touching, there's going to be a little bit of it getting darker because of inclusion shadow, as this is touching that grape. And then we have a little bit of this grape behind it, because I stroked it and brought some of that lighter light into the grape behind it, so it blew that out. So we're going to separate that out just a little bit more. Now this has a dull little highlight on it too. We have to make sure that the highlight isn't as bright as these guys, but there's a little bit of a highlight on this guy. Right there. Keeping it softer a bit, a little darker, a little more diffused. And so again, we're starting to have this thing look like grapes. We're starting to have, you know, this is lighter and this is darker and so forth and so on. And that's what we want. I think we can go ahead and, whoops, that's too light. Too much. So we're going to go ahead and darken it down a little bit, but I need a little bit more light up here. Not as light as the highlight. It's supposed to be our light values, and we're just trying to get a little bit more depth into this thing. Just a tiny bit more depth. Now you could play with this all day long. We're just trying to get just enough that it looks like grapes, or in other words, is what is the term we use is so it reads, and that means so you go, oh, there's just enough so that it actually looks like what we're trying to do, right? Okay. So again, we'll go ahead and soften this up a little bit. Just gently stroke our brush over that area, very gently, very lightly. That was too much, so we're going to go ahead and bring in a color over that. Lighten that up. This is getting darker through here, so we're going to put this darker down here. This is the shadow side. And maybe we're going to take a little bit of this, make it a little bluer for that reflected light as it comes up through there. Maybe soften this. And then as it goes into the light, it's going to get a little warmer, so we're going to bring a little bit of orange into the green. So it's a yellow green, but we're putting just a little bit of orange to that yellow green. See, that was too much. That was probably a little bit too much too quickly, so I'm going to go ahead and mix between the two. Again, softly sort of pull that together. Then we're going to put our light value up here, a little bit more of the yellow, so it doesn't have the orange. So this will seem a little not as warm. It won't seem as warm as that bit that has the orange in it. So we'll put that in. That right there. Okay. And I like that color. I think we need some more of that. So I'll put a little bit of that up here too, I think. Help that just punch it just a little bit more. Maybe just a scotch of it right here as well. Just a bit. And sometimes just a little, just that little bit of contrast will give us a much nicer looking painting. So again, I'm going to leave a lot of these guys to the imagination, and we're just going to come in here with these guys and we're going to put some of the same stuff on here. These are going to be a little simpler. We're going to go ahead and, because I want my eye over here, not worrying about what's over here. So if we detail everything over here, again, it'll pull our eye over there. We're going to leave a lot of that just implied. It's very simple. Put a dark side on it, so I have a light side, dark side, and then we'll put a highlight, and that'll be just enough to go for our eye to go, yeah, that looks like what's going on over here. Therefore, they must be the same. Oh, it must be a grape. So we'll go ahead and put the highlight on there. And we'll put the highlight on over here. The highlight on over here. Like so. And we have got something that's going to be looking a little bit like grapes, because it has the basic shape, it has the basic contrast, it has everything that we normally think of grapes. Now I could use the edge of my brush to do this, or, well, maybe I will. If you had a little round, you'd come in here if you're afraid of screwing some of that up that we just saw that nice. We're going to do, there's some little stems just through the corner here, and we're going to take this and put some of those little stems in. And again, we don't want to go every stem, but we just want enough of it to indicate that, hey, there's some stuff coming up here and stuff. And that's all we need to do is try not to lean in front of her as I'm trying to see this, because this is really kind of on my extreme right, which makes it very hard to see as I'm painting. And so sometimes that ain't so good. Most times that ain't so good. Going to deal with some of the shadows on this thing now a little bit. Rolling over this tablecloth and rolling off around the tablecloth back here. I'm just going to do a little bit with the strawberries, and we're going to call this sort of a finished little study. Again, this is you know, if I was going to do more on this, we just continue to put in more of the values, put in more of the shapes. Like there's a middle, sort of a light middle value as this is coming down. Right through here. Okay, and then we have another little bit over here, where again this is kind of this sort of this pillared little bit where again where it's getting a little darker as it comes down here. So we're going to go ahead and put that in. Right, just a little bit, just a scotch, so we know what's going on with this tablecloth. As this tablecloth turns, it's going to go ahead and it's going to be getting darker as it goes off the page over here. Put some of that in there. Okay. We then have, again, so there's a little bit coming from behind the strawberry over here. We get a little bit of reflected color on it too, so it's got quite a bit of red on it as it comes around the strawberry right through there. It's almost, it has a lot of sort of a red violet sort of a feel, and I'm probably going to put some more in there. And then this is again in sort of a half tone or middle value. All right, and that's all well and good. So I think we've got enough here that I'm actually going to try to see if we can get a little bit more of what's happening in the tablecloth on here. So let's see if we can get some nice values on here, some nice color on here as this is coming forward and coming, you know, sort of going in and out of these the still life here, twisting and turning a little bit. Soften that up a little bit, open that up a little bit. These are the lights. Again, I just need enough so I can see what's happening on this tablecloth. Just enough so I can see what it is I'm looking at. So this is again giving me those lightest lights on that tablecloth. And by the way, if these don't look light enough, that means the darks around it aren't dark enough. Because if it's white, it can't get lighter than that. And the only way that white will look lighter is if the things around it look a little darker. So that's, you know, sometimes we'll find ourselves, I used to do that when I was first learning to paint. I'd be like, man, I gotta get that lighter, you know, and it just dawned on me, you know, hey, wait a minute, I'm at white, it can't get lighter than that. And so, and that's true. Whenever you want something to look lighter, then darken the things around it. That will immediately give you that thing, what you're looking for. Otherwise, you'll be chasing it all day and you'll never find it. It's elusive. It's amazing how it's all about what's next to it. That's what's so, you know, fabulous about painting, is it's all about relationships. It's all about what is this next to that, and what's that next to this, and which is darker, and which is lighter, and what's doing this, and why is that doing that. And it's all, again, just what are the relationships of these different values. You know, so this is just coming over this tablecloth, and there's some of these little values that by making this darker, this looks lighter, so forth and so on. Something like that. This is coming down into here. This is coming down into there. So so forth and so on. So again, we can by this is starting as we're dealing with that, this is starting to come forward a little bit. Nope, that's too light. That's a little better. Like that. All right, then we had a little bit of on the tablecloth where it's a little bit it was actually slightly darker, just where that meets the table, and it goes a little bluer. And we need a little bit darker still because there's a part where it turns. And where that turns, it starts to change the value too, where this gets a little darker as that gets a little lighter, so forth and so on. And then there's a bit back there where it's lighter, so that's where, right just behind here, there's a little pillow top. That's kind of where I was putting that blue in, but it's really compressed through there where this changes from being flat tablecloth to crawling up the table. And so there's a little bit of a, where this changes a little bit through here, a little lighter as it comes off the tablecloth. There's reflected light that brightens that up. That's what's happening. And I want to keep it cooler because if it goes warm at all, this is going to try to come forward, and I need it to go back. So I'm going to try to keep it as cool as I can possibly get it. And then it immediately goes dark because, again, that's just a reflected light. And so then it goes into the shadows. And so you have these shadows right next to it, slightly warmer. Not that warm though. They're just a little bit darker than that because now we're coming up into the shadow side on the cloth and all this, all that sort of stuff. And of course you could play with this again. You could play with this all day long if you so chose. Again, I'd rather just go ahead and put just enough information. That way, if I get too much information there, this starts to look like it has less information because this has to have less information here than this stuff in the foreground. So we want to make sure that we're not, we're not stressing too much what's going on back here. We need just enough information for it to make sense of what's happening back there. So that's important. We need just enough information is all we need. And again, if I start trying to detail this way too much back here, it's not going to look as good, and it'll start to compete with this. That's the whole contrast of edges, and we don't want to get a ton into that now. But as the more you paint, the more that you'll understand. Wow, that's a major concept right there. We want more contrast up here, so. So again, there's just a couple places where we're going to get these really dark darks up here, and it's going to help more contrast here, and that's going to help keep this edge come forward, and that edge should be less contrast, so it should go back as far as that goes. There's a couple of these guys up here that are going into shadow over here that can get just a little bit darker. Not too dark, because again, it's one of these soft illusions. The balance can be lost as quickly as it's received. And I can also use this to direct the eye. Let's say I wanted my eye to come up onto the table here and fade over here. Again, I can one really nice crisp edge against all this softness is going to really bring. See, if I put this one here, now that one's not as important. So if I did this, I'd take this out a little bit so that this edge has a little more importance. Maybe that's too sharp. Maybe we need to just break that up a little bit as far as that goes. Maybe just a little bit more, some value through there, breaking out of that shadow there, breaking out of this here, breaking out of that right there, maybe just a scotch. And again, then we're just going to go ahead and bring in just a couple of stripes on here, and then we're going to take a few minutes on the strawberries, and then we're going to call this, done. I think you get the idea of I want you to try to take this, but I'm letting you into kind of how my brain works when I'm dealing with this stuff. You know, what am I thinking about to help the you know, I don't want to have any edges that are sharp as these. These edges should be softer than those. These should be the softest. And we can use that to start to create depth and space on our image. You can break that up by just scrubbing over it a little bit, moving it around. And that was a light touch. You can hear me, it scraped a little bit across the canvas, but it really is a light touch. I'm also trying to hold on the back of the brush because it's easier to do stuff like that. It's easier to have control at the back of the brush than it does at the front of the brush. That's again a very important concept to understand. This little bit of value is lighter than this right next to it. That goes there. This is then here. All right, so again, and this contrast is helping bring this forward. Again, there's this edge all along here should be a little bit darker than what's up top because this is a flat plane, this is a vertical plane. So I want to make sure we've got some of that going on. And then we're just going to take a couple of more areas. That are in shadow. And again, we just need just enough to have an indication of what's happening up there in the painting. Soften this up just a bit. Now you gotta be careful that you don't comb this too much. If you do, then you have to go back in. You have to repaint, and there you have to put a fresh mark down. Because if you keep blending and blending and blending, it's going to turn to mush and turn to oatmeal. And we want to get to the point where we're confident enough that we could leave a stroke. We're not going to worry a ton about that, but you know, if you get into more advanced painting or plein air painting, again, there's a lot of strokes. You don't have time to play with strokes like that. We're already kind of close to where you'd be ending your painting. Because usually I have about 2 hours to do a halfway decent plein air painting. And I think we're close to 60 minutes right now, somewhere in there. May not seem like that, but has been. All right. So I think I have enough information on the cloth. This seems a little bit too strong. We're going to soften this, I think. Bring in some paint. Instead of just blending it, we're going to actually bring some paint in there. And so that I'm pulling paint with paint that I already had, and it's gonna look better. Same thing with that. That was too streaky. This edge is still too much. I have to get rid of that. So something about like that. I think that's better. A lot softer through here. Because again, we don't want this to upstage what's happening here. Now time for the strawberries. Now, the strawberries are really, they're so great. And again, we have to be careful that we don't go nuts with detail and all this stuff, which is a natural inclination, but will kill the painting. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the core shadows that I think can be just a bit darker on this. Darker still, I believe. Like so. That's better. Okay, something like that. We have some middle values in here that are close to this Christmas red almost. So usually the brightest reds are going to be in the middle values, and this right here are the middle values of this strawberry. So I'm going to put that in there. Okay, and then we have so we have our again, it's a little bit, sort of a middle value through here. Dang it, it's too orange. Let's bring some more red. I need a red orange. There we go. So I stroke that, and that's just what I was looking for. And then we're going to come on in here, and there's a little bit more orange to this. This strawberry, this is one of these strawberries that gets a little bit lighter towards the edge. This also is a little bit brighter right through here, a little bit more of that orange, a little bit. This thing gets a little lighter still. On this strawberry. Okay. I think the cast shadow is maybe a little deeper, so we're going to go ahead and bring some of that in here. Like so. Okay. And then you've got a couple of highlights on here, and the highlights on this strawberry are very important. I'm mixing up the highlight. I'm looking at, because the highlight's not white, and what people will do is they'll put like this frosted little highlight on it. It looks like little bits of white. That's not white, by the way. That's actually a step 9 on the value scale. So we don't want to go too light on the highlight on this strawberry, otherwise it's not going to look right. Okay, and then we're going to have some of the whoops. We have some freckles on this guy, and we don't want to put too many on, but I want a couple on there because that's talking about the... So what I'm trying to describe those two are the spaces between the seeds. The seeds are actually slightly darker, and so you have the seeds that are darker and the spaces between them are a little lighter. And so we can take this, and I don't want to start speckling it everywhere, but we're going to take a couple pathways that are skipping between those seeds a little bit, just to give us the feeling that we are indeed dealing with a strawberry. Okay. Same thing up here. There's some seeds that are a little bit darker towards the end. Through here, too light. Let's go ahead and grab that again. There we go. I just need to break that up a little bit. Break that up a little bit. Something about like that. That's just a little bit light through here and probably a little bit too cool. So we're going to bring some of the orange back in here just a bit. And maybe weave just a little bit of this in here. Again, just a couple of places where I think we have some light values that are just reaching around a little bit to give us, again, the look that that's a strawberry. We're then going to come back over here to the second strawberry. We don't want as much information on him, again, because if we start detailing him out, this one will start to look like it has less detail. So again, it's all about what is this against that. We're constantly asking ourselves, when you're painting, how can I... Because wherever you have the most contrast, the most information, that's where your eye's going to go. And I don't think I want this to compete with this strawberry in front. Otherwise, I'm going to flatten stuff out. Okay. Maybe we'll... Just a little. So anyway, so we've got this little strawberry over here. We're going to come over on this one. So we've got, again, our middle values where we're going to have the strongest color. So we're going to come over here with our Christmas red, or our Namthal red, which is again pretty close to Christmas red, and put that down there for our middle values. Okay. Again, this is all about what are the values. I don't, the strokes, it's not about, we're not worrying about brushmanship. We're not ignoring it either, but it's the most beautiful brushmanship in the world is not going to save, a painting where the values aren't right. The best brushwork in the world is not going to work if the edges are wrong. So we want to try to keep this just as clear as possible as we can, to get as much information as we can into this, and still not and not take through. We don't have 3 weeks to paint this, but if we can paint it and stay true to the values, whether we continue the detailing or not, that will decide how, if I can keep the values correct, even if I'm doing a very quick painting like this, or if I'm doing a much more controlled painting with realism or even hyper-realism, it's all about the values. That's what makes this work. So you need to remember that it's always about the values. There's an old saying, one that I actually used to just bother the heck out of me when they'd say it to you, but in art school you heard all the time, keep it simple, stupid. KISS. They'd say, come on, remember KISS, remember that KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And, I was I was like, hey, who you calling stupid? But it's true. It's all about the basic stuff that's going to help this. Whether you're doing realism or photorealism or hyperrealism or just plain old, if you're doing impressionism or representationalism, it's all about the basics. It doesn't matter what level you take it at, the basics have to be there. And if they're there, great, and if they're not, you're in a lot of trouble. So, good thing to keep in mind. Because it's usually where we drop the ball, is the values aren't right, or the edges aren't right, or we're trying to think of detail long before we even have the shapes right, or the values right, because if the shapes aren't right, and the values aren't right, all the best little cutesy little details in the world will not save the painting. If they are right, it'll just add to it. If they're not right, it'll be a distraction. It'll be something that, you know, doesn't quite look right. People will wonder why it seems strange, and they won't be able to put their finger on it. But as artists, we actually have to put our fingers on it, and that's why we study to get better, and we understand that, no, it's a value problem. That's what's happening here. This is a value problem, or no, this is a shape problem, or no, this is an edge problem. We don't really talk about edge near as much right now, but as you get further into painting, we talk more and more about it because it becomes more and more and more important the more you paint. Edges, and what is this edge against that edge, and so forth and so on. So once again, we're going to be putting in the highlights. I think we've got enough on this strawberry, where now all we need to do is put, you know, the highlight on this guy. We don't want it to be as bright as this one. So again, we have to be careful about that. And the highlight is broken up over this skin that has these subtle little bumps in it. That's, you know, because it's going into where the seeds are and stuff. And again, if we can get just a little bit of that feel, not too much. Like right now, this feels like it's just a bunch of dots, and because they just, there's no relationship. But I can go ahead and combine a couple, and all of a sudden they have a relationship, and all of a sudden, like, wow, okay, yeah, that's looking good. And that's what we're looking for, is always just that little bit of more relationship. Now, I got to be careful, because now this is more contrast than that. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to take this brush and very gently see if I can just stroke it that way, which will darken a little bit, and then come back in here just a scotch there and there to, again, try to get it so that the contrast isn't off. There's all these little nuances that we're constantly dealing with as we paint. That was a mistake, so I'll go ahead and reload my brush, because if I just try to incorporate that, it won't work. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get in there, fill that up. And now I think we've got enough that the strawberries are starting to read. And again, I could play with this more, but we don't need a ton more. Now we do need to deal with the bad hair day on these, on the leaves. That can't just be left like that. So this is, we're kind of at the point where we have to be a little bit more careful as we place each stroke, because we don't want to have to repaint a whole area. I don't want to have to scrape. So if I miss these leaves, yeah, I'm going to get out my palette knife and scrape this, because otherwise it's going to be terrible. If I start just trying to work paint to paint into paint, try to repaint it because it's not what I want, I'm going to end up with something that looks like oatmeal. You're going to get this really bad, you know, textury, you know, strokes on strokes on strokes. It just is a telltale sign that someone screwed their painting up. And that's usually not what we want. We're not trying to tell people, hey, look how I screwed that up. But it becomes because you can see the struggle through all the strokes and all the restrokes and the strokes again and again and again. And it just says, oh, look, I can't get it to do what I want. And there'll be times where you can't get something to do what you want, but the smart way to go about it is go, look, instead of building up a whole bunch of strokes that are going to look like I didn't get the stroke over and over and over again, I'm going to put a stroke down. If I don't like it, I'm going to scrape it. And I put another stroke down. If the stroke doesn't work, I'm going to scrape it. And I'm going to keep doing that until I put down a stroke and I go, nope, that's it. Boom. I don't have to touch it anymore. And that's, you know, what you want to do. You want to make it look like it belongs. And everyone struggles. See, this is something that people don't talk enough about, and sometimes even professional artists don't like to talk about it, because they want this illusion that, you know, they just step up, you know, to the easel and it all flows for them from the muses through their arm onto the canvas and all this nonsense. And it's not like that. It's a struggle, it's a battle, it's a war. You know, usually even, you know, concert pianists will spend, you know, lots of time practicing. They just don't jump on a piano after not practicing for weeks and go, yeah, I'm going to rip out the best song I ever played. It ain't going to happen. You know, so most of the people I know that are into that are concert pianists, they spend all kinds of time honing their skills. Now, I only know a couple, and I know them from college that they went on to a career just like they knew me, because I was in college and I was studying art, so I'm probably one of the few artists they know. But the thing is, again, they're doing something that's highly skilled, very difficult, and takes all kinds of copious amounts of time, so they can make it feel like and seem like they just stepped up to that piano and that it just flowed through them, like, from the Muse Calliope or whatever, and that's fine. I mean, you want that. That's the professionalism part. But there's a whole lot behind that, and that's all I'm saying is that with this, what we're doing, there's a whole lot behind the scenes that sometimes people who want to keep the mystique. I don't have any problem pulling back the curtain. I don't have any problem saying, look, this is how it works. Just like, a magician who says, look, if you're trying to be a magician, hopefully you're going to have someone who cares enough to go, here's how the trick is done. Instead of just saying, well, keep your eyes open, you'll figure it out. That would be terrible. Most people would be like, forget this, I'm going to actually go someplace where they'll train me. And I wouldn't blame them either. And we want some of that, we want someone who cares enough when you're learning to paint that will train you, that will let you know about how the tricks are done. So that you can do the tricks. Right? That's the whole point. That's the whole point of training. Train someone so they can do it, not just so you can, watch them fail and snicker in the background and feel like you're so special somehow because you know something that you didn't pass on. And and most people are really giving, but I have met artists where they're like, well, I'll teach people to a certain extent, but I'm going to hold back some special knowledge that I think I have. And usually the funny part is it's not all that special. It's not the first time someone knew how to use it, and so it's kind of they're deluding themselves into thinking somehow they're just so special and all that sort of stuff. And again, I'm not saying that everyone's like that, but I have met a few that are like that, and some are very upfront about it, and others try to hum and haw it. But you can, you have enough, after years and years and years, you can tell. You just sit there and listen to these guys talking to people, and you're just going, man, they're really like to hear themselves talk, but they don't really like to be very genuine with sharing what it takes to make a good painting and what it takes to do this, and letting their students know what has to be done to level up. And because sometimes